Hello, this YouTube video is brought to you by Engineering One Central. This is a tutorial on how to choose the parts for your custom PC. To start off, you need to go to PCPartsPicker.com and create an account. PC Parts Picker helps check compatibility between all of your components. So, once you create an account, go to Start a System Build. Then the first thing you have to choose in every time you build a computer is the CPU. How I choose my CPU is I go to this website, cpubenchmark.net. This website will be in the description. So you go to cpu.net and then you see a list of benchmark CPUs, which are CPUs that have been tested by other people to see how good they are. Generally, unless you're doing a very intensive program, you do not need a great CPU. But if you want a good computer that will last you for the future, I would recommend the Intel iCore 7, where is it? 790, 790K, here it is. And once you click on the CPU, it compares it to other CPUs. And then it gives you a CPU power to price comparison. And it gives you a pricing history over the past few months. It also, down here, this is very important, it shows you how well each of these CPUs tested. These are 5 different CPUs. So once you choose a CPU that you think would be good for you and fits in your budget, the next thing you need to do is choose a motherboard. So for that, I chose the 97. What was that? The 4790K. Which is this one right here. You click add, and now that CPU is added to your cart. The next thing you need to do is choose a CPU cooler. Generally, the stock CPU coolers that come with your CPU are not very good, and your CPU will be running hot. A CPU cooler that I like and is compatible for most CPUs is the Corsair H55. It is a water-cooled CPU and is fairly cheap. The next thing you need to do is choose a motherboard. This is kind of a daunting task for people who don't know much about computers. So the first thing you need to do is make sure enabled compatibility filter is checked, and then you need to make a couple decisions. Do you want to do SLI, which is using more than one graphics card? And then if so, how many ways of SLI do you want to do? So I generally like to do 2-way SLI. If you do 4K, you definitely need 2-way SLI as of 2015. And then the next step is to choose your SATA ports. These ports are what you plug in your hard drives and SSDs to, and the newest port is 6 GB per second. So make sure you have at least 2 of those, and that will narrow down your search. And then that is pretty good for now. If you want to do onboard video, which I do not recommend, you can choose yes. It's sometimes nice for getting your computer up and running to make sure that there isn't any problems with your graphics card if it doesn't boot. And I like USB 3.0 headers. They're a whole lot faster than the other USB 2.0. The main thing in choosing a motherboard is make sure it has an LED readout unless you are very knowledgeable about computers and know what happens. So you just click on a motherboard. I generally like to start a little bit cheaper, so you can sort it by rating or price, or you can just scroll down in the rating. And I like this motherboard right here. So I always look at it here, and then you can see the form factor is ATX, so you have to buy an ATX case. The socket is LGA 1150, which is what our CPU is. And that's the chipset of the motherboard. And this is important right here, the memory type. So you can only have DDR3 memory in this motherboard. It will not support DDR4. And the fastest memory it will accept is 2800 hertz. And the maximum amount of memory you can put in this motherboard is 32 gigabytes. So if you, for some reason wanted more than 32 gigabytes of memory, you would have to get a different, more expensive motherboard. RAID support. This is handy if you want to use more than one hard drive at a time, so it makes one hard drive into two. It's kind of complicated. It makes two hard drives turn into one hard drive, so you can get faster performance. So it doubles your performance if you go with a RAID 0 configuration. Crossfire support is AMD's version of SLI, and SLI is NVIDIA's version of using two graphics cards. And then this motherboard has 6 SATA 6 GB per second ports. So this motherboard looks pretty good, so let's go to Newegg. I have really slow internet here. So then the first thing I do is go to the image of the motherboard, this one, and then I click on it, and then I look for a debug LED. And it does not have one. So then you go back to PC Parts Picker, look for a different motherboard. Let's just say we look at this motherboard, go to Newegg, and then lo and behold, this motherboard does have a debug LED. So once you choose a motherboard with a debug LED, the debug LED is right there. Then you go to PC Parts Picker and add it to parts list. PC Parts Picker also sorts through all the different websites to make sure you get the best deal possible if you're fine from ordering from just other websites that aren't Newegg or Amazon. So the next step is to choose memory. I generally go with 16 gigs And depending on how many slots on the motherboard, this has 4 RAM slots. So I like to go with a memory of 16 gigabytes, and this is 2 8 GB sticks. So if you wanted to expand your RAM in the future, you could do so if you choose 2 8 GB sticks. Then I like to sort the RAM by voltage. Make sure your RAM is 1.5 volts or under. And then you need to sort it by speed to make sure the fastest RAM is at the top. And then the fastest RAM is also the most expensive. And then you scroll down until you find a reasonably priced RAM that's the fastest. But just for time's sake, I'll just click on a random one and add it. It is also good to, especially on your CPU and motherboard, to read the reviews to make sure there's not a bug in the motherboard or the CPU. The next step is to choose a hard drive. You can look at hard drive benchmarks, but I will just use this Western Digital hard drives. They're really good if you're choosing a regular 7200 RPM 1 terabyte hard drive. I highly recommend this one. And to choose, if you want to choose an SSD, you just Google SSD benchmarks. And then I like this website. And then you can sort, instead of best user rating, you go to raw speed comparison. And then this is a great SSD. So you can click on it and just see how much you want to spend. I'll just do one for the operating system. So I'll get the Samsung 850 Pro. So then I'll go back to PC Parts Picker, add additional storage, 850 Pro. And then I'll choose the 128 gigabyte model, which is $90. And then video cards, probably the second most important part to your whole PC build. And to choose what video card you want, you'll have to go back to the benchmarking website, which is GPU benchmarks. And then you go to the high-end GPUs. GPU stands for graphics processing unit. This is also the same website as we used for the CPU benchmarks. So you go to high-end, and if you don't want to spend more than $400 on a graphics card, I definitely recommend the GeForce GTX 970. So then you go to Newegg or any website like it. I just love Newegg. And you just search the GTX 970. And then you will see a lot of different brands making the same graphics card, which is a little bit confusing at first. So each of these brands offers a little different product. The MSI has a couple of different features. than the EVGA one. But I like EVGA because it has a faster default overclock than MSI, so it runs faster than the MSI. And I like the GTX 970 ACX 2.5 FTW. And another special thing about this graphics card is if you go to specifications, it supports the new DirectX 12 3D API, which is what Windows 10 will be using, and it will run faster on Windows 10. So I am going to go with this graphics card. So copy, paste into PC Parts Picker, and then here it is, and I'll add it to my cart. And then choosing a case. With the GTX 970, it is really helpful to have an ATX full tower case, and a case that's really good for the money. I think I've used it in 2 different PC builds. I have no idea how to say that, but this case right here, it doesn't look the best, but it comes with a lot of fans, and it has nice thumb screws to build the computer, and it's a nice case. So then I'll just add that to parts list, and it's big. It comes with 4 120 millimeter fans, so it's pretty good. And the next thing you have to do is choose a power supply. And then a nice thing about PC Parts Picker is it estimates the wattage. Right now, wattage is 361 watts, but I like to factor in my wattage for 2 graphics cards in case I ever wanted to in the future, if I wanted to go with 4K. So then that brings my wattage up to 506 watts. So I would recommend choosing a power supply that's 750 watts or 650 or above. So then you just sort it by wattage with this little slider, 750 watts. And then you just choose a power supply that has good reviews. Like EVGA is a very good company, so I'll just go with that one. Just make sure you read the reviews on all the computer parts that you order. And the next thing you have to do is order an optical drive. I generally just go with the recommended one just because they're so cheap and they're not really a big part. You don't even have to have an optical drive anymore, but they're cheap, so why not? And then you have to choose an operating system. So choose a 64-bit operating system, and then it's your choice, personal preference, if you want Windows 8 or Windows 7. And if you don't know what OEM stands for, it's I have no idea what it stands for, but it means that you cannot transfer this Windows license to another computer. So just keep that in mind. And also keep in mind, Windows 7 Home Premium only supports 16 gigabytes of RAM. So Windows 8 supports a whole lot more. So I'm just going to go with Windows 8 OEM. And then monitor, just read the reviews on monitors, it's personal preference. And then the last big thing is wireless networking adapter. So when you choose a wireless networking adapter, you want to make sure, if you don't know what this means, it means the more letters, the more sections of wireless internet you can tap into. So make sure you have this one selected. And then also make sure you have PCI Express port selected. And then if you click on it, you can see how many megabytes per second this networking card can handle, and 867 megabytes per second is plenty for me, and it's fairly cheap. It's a nice little cherry on top of your build to make your gaming experience that much faster. And then I'll just exit out of that second graphics card. And keep in mind, if you do a full tower case like this, sometimes you might have a little bit of trouble routing power to the CD drive and to a hard drive located at the bottom of the drive bay. So you might need to buy a SATA power extension. That's only about $10 though. So then you can see the grand total of this build is $1,432.50, not including tax, $60 in mail-in rebates, and that's pretty good. And let's say, and any errors will be down here, so let's just make an error. So let's say we chose more than 32 gigs of memory, and we chose this one right here, and we just chose one of these. You would get a big warning up here because this would fill up all of our RAM slots and max out the amount of RAM on the motherboard. And down here it will give you little warnings that you can read, and it just tells you that won't work. So if you just exit out of this, it will resolve the error. And this is how you choose the parts to build a PC. Thanks for watching.